Welcome to another episode of Black Girl Diagnosed. Today we're joined and very honored to have Charlotte Bachelor here, a late diagnosed autistic and ADHD writer and speaker from Detroit, Michigan. Charlotte began documenting her diagnostic story while studying at Michigan State University, where she earned her degree in professional and public writing with a minor in African American studies. Charlotte's passion for advocacy and authentic storytelling continues to uplift and empower her community, reminding us that every story has power to make a difference. Let's welcome Charlotte Bachelor to the show. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me today. I'm happy to be here.
You are so welcome. So let's get right into it. Um, do you want to share why community is so important for Black autistic women and how it has shaped our journey?
Yeah, so I think community support is not just in the autistic community, but for um, Black women of any disabled Black women with any diagnosis is so important because it's so easy for us to become siloed and feel like I'm the only person going through this. Nobody understands me, and that's where kind of stigma and shame and guilt come from. And so, my experience becoming disabled later in life in college and going through that journey, it was isolating because for a period, I didn't really have a community. A lot of my friends went away. A lot of people weren't showing up for me. And so the more I got honest with myself and the more I put myself out there saying, hey, I'm a person with a disability. I have XYZ challenges, but that doesn't make me incapable of having friendships or relationships or being a good friend or a good sister. Um, when I started to be more authentic, that's when the real community showed up. And it keeps me
Yes.
grounded to have people who support me, who might have my same disability, who might not be disabled, but really, surrounding yourself. Humans aren't meant to be isolated creatures. So when I finally was able to break out of that isolation and find community, that's when everything kind of started to come together for me.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing. And I can completely relate. There was a time when I isolated myself when I was diagnosed and I didn't want to come to terms with it, but I was just making myself miserable. But when I accepted my diagnosis, that's when I became happier and that's when I was able to live my life fully and live in my truth. So it is very important to have community, but at the same time, it is a bit of a challenge when you're disabled, when you have any type of disability because people aren't always open to you and open to your challenges or having to deal with that. So it
Mhm.
is very important, and you made such an amazing point with that. So, many people struggle with internalized ableism. How have you navigated these challenges personally, and what advice would you give others focusing on the same?
That is a great question because that is something I think, if I'm honest, I still struggle with, especially as somebody who not only just has autism and ADHD, but also has a chronic illness. That understanding that I've been in remission for almost 4 years with POT syndrome, but there are some days that are going to be bad days, and pushing myself to the brink of exhaustion is just not going to work.
Mhm.
So there are times when I have to sit to myself and say, like, a disability is disabling, as silly as that sounds, but it majorly impacts the way you function, you work, your self-care, your basic daily living activities. So reminding yourself that, like, yeah, I went to college and got the degree and I'm doing the conferences, but it's still okay to struggle. So just, showing grace to myself, being honest in my storytelling, because it's not all being flyed out to conferences and doing podcasts and, shaking hands with people. Sometimes it's like, dang, I can't get the dishes done, or I'm struggling just to get this assignment done or send this email out. Um, so I think being honest with myself and realizing that I'm a work in progress, that, as somebody with a chronic illness, I don't think I'll ever be, back to what I was before my chronic illness set in. And
Yeah.
that's okay. That's not to say my life is bad or is terrible, but I had, something that changed the way my body functioned. And it's been a journey of having to be a lot more kinder and understanding to myself. A lot of people in my community, my friends, my sorority sisters, my family, are very understanding. And they're usually the first person to tell me when I'm stressing about, like, oh, I need to push, push, push. They're the one normally telling me to put my foot on the brake and ease up, take that day to yourself, take that afternoon to yourself. Um, So really internalized ableism, I think it's not a bad thing to acknowledge it. Acknowledging it is the first step in becoming a becoming more accepting and becoming more understanding of yourself as a disabled individual, especially if this is something that became more apparent or made itself more prominent later in life that it did like it did for me.
Yeah, it is. And just quickly, I just want to thank you because you have been so supportive since we connected on social media. You share my posts, you like my posts, you share it to your networks. And I really, really appreciate that because you don't always find that in people. You don't always find people who show genuine support. So I just wanted to send you a sincere thank you for all the support that you show me.
Yes, no problem.
So, everybody, autism is in the news a lot now in a very, very negative way. Every time we hear something, it's rarely anything positive. The current administration, it just feels like they hate us. But so, in these times of uncertainty or crisis, what strategies and coping mechanisms have you found effective for advocating for yourself and your community?
Well, I know as a Black woman, I'm not the voice the administration is looking for as a Black disabled woman. They don't want to hear from me. They don't want to hear from you. They don't want to hear from none of us. So, really, what I try to do is to spark change on a small level in my community. So, for example, I'm a trainee with the Michigan LIND program. LIND is an advanced training program for working with people and families with neurodevelopmental and intellectual disabilities. And so there are a lot of free continuing education courses I do as a part of my 300-hour course of study. So one is through the American Academy on Pediatrics on autism identification and collaborative care with medical professionals, self-advocates, and caregivers. And that link is free. So I shared it out to my community like, y'all, knowledge is power. The only way we combat mis and disinformation is learning how to spot it and learning what are the facts about the situation. So I will share that. um, Here in Detroit, there are so many organizations on the ground serving our Black and Brown children, making a safe space for parents, for young people. Whenever somebody in my network has an event, I'm sharing it, I'm liking, I'm posting it. I can't be everywhere at once, but if I can help reach a parent who's in crisis, or reach a caregiver, or reach a young autistic adult, I think that is what's happening because unfortunately, the mis and disinformation is going to harm the most vulnerable in our community. Those
Yeah.
people with higher support needs and co-occurring conditions, and parents who do not have the resources to manage and are already at their, at the end of their rope trying to manage that. And that will force them to do risky things. That's why we might see higher rates of abuse and neglect and autistic children with higher support needs, or unfortunately unfortunate things happening at the hands of caregivers. So really focusing on where I am and trying to impact change and just keep those lines of communication open, that is what I do, because people are more willing to listen to someone in their community versus somebody else, because my job is not to spread mis and disinformation. I can't tell people how to think, but I can help them make better, more informed choices. And I think that is so important, especially with my writing background and a background in like rhetoric and marketing, just being very mindful about the storytelling and, just meeting people where they're at, really, in terms of their knowledge and helping them expand their mindset.
Yeah, that's really a good point, and I think that's going to help a lot of people. And we did kind of touch on this, but being a Black autistic woman, do you find it harder to form like meaningful friendships and hold on to those friendships and have those friendships last?
So that's a good question. I'm 25 now. I'm gonna say like when I was a teenager, it was a teenager into college was kind of difficult because when you're a teenager, it's easier. You're in clubs, you're in school with the same people from sixth grade to high school. And so really coming into my own where it felt like when I was getting to college that some people were more advanced or more adults or more adultish than me in some ways and based off my interest. And I will say, yes, it's a struggle, especially I was a Black autistic woman at a predominantly white institution. I went to a predominantly white middle and high school growing up. So when you throw that in the mix, that adds its own layer of difficulty. But also I will say the pandemic Also put a spin on that. I was relying a lot on like online groups and like Discord and TikTok and Instagram and connecting with people who had the same interest as me, but it didn't really feel like it hit home. So really I would say towards the end of my college, my junior and senior year, I started to really like surround myself with people who could mentor me, maybe a little bit older, maybe a little bit more experienced, and just, being honest and showing up as myself. I was kind of led to the right people. Your teens and 20s are difficult for anybody and everybody, especially the day and age we live in. When you compound disability on top of it, it's its own can of worms.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely. And especially being Black and disabled.
Yes. So I think for me, like finding people I could have honor conversations with. I don't want to say any of my friends are disability experts, but they, would ask questions or support my work or support my research. Or when I have a podcast, I know some of my sorority sisters are the first people liking, commenting, and resharing. Some of them aren't even, disability advocates, but just to support me. So I would say when I kind of came into my own and found my people, it was refreshing. It was not easy. But I think in your 20s, you're going to go through a couple of different versions of yourself. And that's not to say you're flaky or you're being a different person or you are sometimey. But once I kind of came into myself and understood myself as a woman, it was easier for me to see, how I can kind of intersect and how I kind of could find my own place in the world and in these relationships.
Yes, yeah, that you opened up my eyes a lot to everything you just said just now. So we see you out there, you're doing amazing things, you're speaking, you're doing podcasts, you're advocating true advocacy. Do you have any recent projects that you'd like to share with our listeners?
So I am, of course, always on Instagram at Charlotte Says and on LinkedIn at my government name, Charlotte Bachelor. Last night I was inspired to start something called the Bonnet Chronicles on Instagram. So it's gonna be reels of me in my pajamas, me in my various bonnets, and we're gonna talk about my experiences being disabled, funny stories, bad stories, always a little bit of humor in it, but just really bringing insight about what Black disabled women face. So, like last night's story was about when I had to check into inpatient treatment and I was transferring from the ER to the inpatient psychiatric facility. I had the white paramedic try to tell me he was 2% Black based on his ancestry DNA test.
Oh,
So I'm like, I'm just on a little gurney chilling. I'm nervous. I'm an hour and a half away from home trying to get help for the first time. And I was stopping and thinking about that story. And I'm like, you're not a soul brother. Time and place. I don't know how this is supposed to help me feel better, but it's things like that people don't consider happen to Black disabled people. It's not the most harmful thing or the most offensive thing I've ever faced, but it's kind of one of those things that make you go, mm-hmm. So Bonnet Chronicles coming soon. And I can get to it because I do have a 9 to 5. I will be speaking at Autism in Black next year in April, so keep an eye out on that. And I will
amazing.
also be at the Michigan Disability Empowerment Conference on October 24th in Dearborn, Michigan, having a session on race, gender, and disability. So if you need a crash course on that, that's
That,
where
yes.
I'll be.
Okay, that all sounds amazing and wonderful. And we're actually doing our first Black Girl Diagnosed online summit next March. So I'd love to have you. We can talk off air about
Mhm.
that. But as far as we're winding things down, is there anything that you would like people to know or take away from the interview, something we didn't touch on?
I just want to let people know, especially my young Black autistic women, I know it's not easy. It gets easier over time and it's heavy, even if you carry the load well, even if you carry, you know, what society, misogyny, or racism, colorism, texturism. And it's okay to feel like it's heavy some days. It's okay to acknowledge that you're not giving up, you're not complaining. But despite how heavy the load may be, somebody is going to see you pushing on and
Right.
somebody's going to see you shining. And that is what has kept me going. as an advocate. So you won't have all the answers now. I'm 25. I sure don't have all the answers, but just know there are resources like Black Girl Diagnosed, my page, but there are other women, that are laying the framework so y'all don't, so the younger people don't have to go through what we went through. So please reach out, tap in with your resources, and don't be afraid to put yourself out there because you do not know who might need to hear your story.
Yeah, and oh my God, like when I started sharing my story on Instagram, I didn't consider myself an advocate. It was a name that somebody else gave it to me. But it was just so strange to see people coming to me, telling me that, I give them hope for their child or they're learning a lot about their child from me. That's something that I never expected. And I always say this, if I could just help one parent or, help them see their child in a new light and know what the world looks like from an autistic point of view, then I feel like that I've done something, it might not change the world, but if it helps one person, then that's enough for me.
Yes.
So we can find you at Charlotte Says and Charlotte Bachelor. Do you have any other social media accounts or places that you would like people to find you and follow you?
I am also on Substack. Sorry, I need to find my Substack account, y'all. I don't use it that often, but I do post on there from time to time. I have a poem up on there right now called When You Get Sick about the inevitability of disability. So, especially in our time, so you can find me on Substack, Charlotte Bachelor, my first and last name, and on Instagram, I'm Charlotte Says with two S's on the end. Would love to see you. My DMs are always open, and if I don't have an answer, I can definitely point you in the direction of a resource or
Right.
somebody to help you out.
Right. Yes, I love that. I love to see Black autistic women come together and work together, build community, and do all of this just to give back to the next generation. Me, I'm a millennial. I'm almost 10 years older than you. So it's just like, when you see the young Black autistic little girls and the young Black autistic teenagers, a lot of them can feel lost. I know that's how I felt when I was a teenager, even though I was undiagnosed. I wasn't diagnosed until 10 years ago. So I really spent like my entire life feeling like I didn't belong in this world. But I want to thank you again for sharing your powerful story and your wisdom to all our listeners. Thank you for tuning in to Black Girl Diagnosed. Your presence and support means everything. And until next time, keep advocating with love.